I used to break into houses. I'm not particularly proud of it, but it was a different time in my life. A more desperate time. I won't make excuses for it. All I can say is I needed a quick way to make money, and typical employment options were not exactly open to me. My last job, however, something happened that I can never explain, and also never forget. Something I have never really told anyone, but I think it will drive me insane if I don't. Maybe I'm headed there anyway. I had a buddy named Sam who helped me, or rather I helped him, since he was more experienced at the whole career criminal thing. I did this for about 2 years, going into houses, taking whatever we thought was worth it. We only ever did it when we were absolutely sure nobody was home. Sometimes we would stake out the place for weeks or even a few months. We tried not to get anything too physically heavy. Pretty much anything valuable was fair game. Sometimes we would keep things for ourselves though. We once found a few 8-balls and made pretty good windfall out of that at this one place. Sometimes we just found pot or booze, but usually we just partook of that ourselves, usually in celebration of a successful job. A lot of times, we would get little knickknacks we thought were cool, keychains, clothing, shit like that. Sam had found us a nice little mark for a little bacon and eggs, our code word for our little thing. It was out of the way, so minimum chances of witnesses, and apparently the owner was trying to sell it and was no longer living there, but had yet to move all their stuff out. This was an unusually easy job. That should have been a hint. It sounded like a cakewalk. We just had to time it right to be careful. We decided we would want to start after dark the following Friday. We had to arrange to borrow the van we used, which incidentally cut TC, the guy who owned the one we used, in on some of the action. TC was a madman, but we needed him. And for this kind of work, you needed a specific kind of vehicle. It was a piece of junk, but it had a lot of space and was easy to change. We repainted it and switched the tags on it at least a dozen times, after and before every job we used it for. The ride there was long. It was a bit out of the way, and Sam only knew of it because he knew a guy that knew the owner that let it slip what the situation was. It had only taken a bit of online research to find the address based on the fact it was for sale. It was unusually empty on the highway for a Friday night, but we rarely went this far out into the boonies. Dusk was falling. So why is this guy even selling the place? I asked Sam. I think Mikey told me about it, but I was more interested in the other details, not so much if anything is wrong with the house. This bothered me a little. Yeah, well, what if the place has a gas leak or mold or some shit? I asked. I looked at him as he leaned back. Then I guess this might be our last job together. Nice knowing you, buddy. I remember him saying that while smirking. He must have sensed I was a little nervous. Relax. If it was anything serious, they wouldn't be putting it on the market so fast, he said. Something was needling me about the whole situation, but just barely. A little prick in the back of my mind that I could not quite figure out. The sky got darker, and there were fewer and fewer cars on the road. There were no headlights either. Only open fields and dark thickets on either side of us. We got into town a bit after 10 p.m., and it was drizzling a little. We waited a bit longer at a gas station parking lot before going to the place. It was an old house. Not like ludicrously so, but you could tell it had probably been built before cars were a thing. The house was out of the way, a few blocks from any neighbors, so we had that as an advantage. It was 3 stories including the attic. But Sam also told me there was a basement. It was fogging up from the rain, which was actually great, as it would give us further cover. Everything seemed perfect, and yet something about the house seemed off to me. I remember a slight sense of foreboding, as the large wooden structure seemed to loom over us. Yeah, that's the word for how it looked. It was looming. I remember thinking how tall it looked, and yet narrow. It had a very angular design triangular roof, and was made mostly of wood, it looked like. I asked Sam about the potential for cameras or alarms, and he shrugged. We had a police scanner, in addition to radios to keep in touch. We just gotta boogie on out if there's an alarm. And we got a mask and gloves for the cameras. Come on, let's do this, he said as we moved towards the back of the house going around the side. We had an idea of what the place was like, and that there was a cellar in the back which led into the sub-basement. We had bolt cutters and made short work of the chain and padlock. A faint spark flying from the strain of the cut as we opened the cellar doors carefully and looked down at the wooden steps that led into the dank, dark basement. I remember the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I remember now knowing for sure that something was bothering me about this place. I was not a superstitious type. I never believed in ghosts or demons or anything like that. But there was just something about how this whole thing was going down. An instinctive dread that had been steadily building. It was more than typical nerves and adrenaline that came with doing a job. This was different, like a tiny bell ringing somewhere in the city of my mind, letting the villagers know to go inside. Uh-oh, boogeyman living down there? Sam teased, probably sensing the apprehension. I'll go first then, he said, as he crept down the stairs and put on his flashlight. It was a bright one too, and as I followed and turned on mine, I was a bit put off by how little of the cellar they were illuminating. The darkness was sticking, and stubbornly refused to be washed away by the light easily, too thick to be completely dispelled. It was not the kind of thing you can confirm as really being a problem, but it was enough to be annoying at best and unsettling at worst. There might be some old wine down here. That shit might sell, I said. But it's not like me and Sam knew people in the vineyard business. We separated a bit, and I didn't like that. But I was refusing to give in to my anxiety. We were professionals at this point. I heard the sound of bolt cutters again. Then I remember Sam making a weird noise from the other room before yelling out, "What in the flying ever living? Hey, yo, come see this." I followed his voice, and I felt the room I was in was getting a little chilly. I thought I had seen shadows moving, but had chalked it up to the tricky lighting of my flashlight. When I got to Sam, he was in a separate room behind a heavy metal door. What we were looking at was disturbing. It was like some weird cross between a BDSM party room and some kind of shrine. I let out a whistle, my discomfort forgotten as I absorbed the scandalousness of it all. This was out there. Red walls, leather suits hanging on hooks, candles with weird-looking statues. There was a strange sort of altar. It looked like it had a brass frame, and there was a red cloth over it, though it was dusty and torn. There was one particular idol on it that looked to be 4 people intertwined in an act of debauchery and torture. The wax figures were melded together to create the gruesome figurine. I had never seen anything like it before, and that foreignness made it all the more unsettling. This was not something you recognize from the movies or folklore, which made it seem all the more real and yet strange. Each pale face on the idol was a mixture of horror, agony, and something else. Maybe pleasure. What the hell? I said in a low tone. I felt the overwhelming urge to turn the light on. We normally did not turn on lights for obvious reasons, but we were still in the basement, and being seen was not likely anyway, given the house's relative seclusion. I went to feel for a light switch and found one. I flicked it, but it would not go on. It clicked again and again, but I wasn't getting any juice. Do you know if the electricity is still on here? I asked. Sam shrugged. You know we should not be doing that. Come on. For the first time in his voice, he didn't sound like everything was a joke. A few seconds after was when I heard something in the corner of the room. A thump. We both turned to point our flashlights at the source of the sound, but there was nothing. I remember asking, "This is a hell of a thing to show on the open house, I bet." But I knew this room was not meant to be seen yet by any prospective buyers. "Yeah, let's get this done," he said. Even despite the creepy sound, whatever went on down here was probably not anything we wanted to know too much about. or stick around too long to be introduced to it. It occurred to me that if the owner came home, we might be in deeper trouble than we ever imagined. I wanted to get it over with and get out, not end up as some weirdo sacrificial gimp in their secret velvet magic dungeon. We checked out the basement and found some power tools we could sell, putting them near the stairs that led out. I was focusing hard on looking and quickly moving the goods, ignoring the growing anxiety in the back of my brain, a rattling of the cage of my mind, the cage that stops us from acknowledging what we do not see. I wanted to get out of the basement, but I didn't want to venture into the rest of the house alone. Want to help me check out the upstairs? I asked Sam, trying to keep the apprehension out of my voice. Maybe Sam was not as brave as I was giving him credit for, because he seemed very keen on the idea. We walked up the stairs a bit more quickly than we normally did, and found the door was locked from the other side, which was also pretty odd. Someone could easily end up locked in the basement, with the cellar being bolted on the outside, and the door leading to the first floor also being locked from the outside. It was becoming apparent that this seemed to be the point, to keep someone from getting out of the basement. Sam cursed, remarking that it might take a while, and asked me to hold the flashlight while he messed with the lock. I did, and felt more and more unsettled, more vulnerable as he worked and fumbled with the metal. I kept seeing little signs of movement in the darkness surrounding us, but ignored them. I thought I heard something in the faint shadows, but it was hard to tell with my partner in crime messing around with the lock. He got it open after what seemed like must have been at least 20 minutes, and the door creaked open all too slowly and all too loudly. We both went into the house proper and found ourselves in the kitchen. This was the rough part. We knew we had to split up. Sam said he would take the lower floor. He told me to take the upper floor. For some reason, this irked me, like he gave me the shit job. I didn't want to put that much distance between me and the exit, but he was the brains of the operation. I got to the stairs, and they were very steep, wood, with a narrow wall heading up. The stairs went up into a yawning abyss, an abyss I would rather do anything else other than go into. I went up, one step at a time, carefully. The stairs seemed to go on a bit longer than they should, and I kept the flashlight on the ground to guide my footing, as if the stairs seemed designed to easily trip someone up. I was afraid to point it into the shadows that waited at the top of the stairs, but when I finally started getting to the summit, I had no choice, and the light I was shining found itself only piercing the darkness to a shallow degree. I remember thinking I had never been in a house so pitch dark before. I heard Sam messing about downstairs, moving stuff, as I went into the upstairs hall. There were a series of doors, and all of them closed. With the feeling of dread I had, the thought of opening each one at a time was torture. I was about to start with door number 1 when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I turned around fast as hell and was relieved to see Sam. It was slim pickings downstairs apparently, so he had come up to help me handle the upstairs. I was extremely happy about it, but didn't show it. I just felt a little bit more courage than I had previously. Then the image of the sick little doll thing on the altar flashed in my mind. Yeah, I wanted to get the hell out of here. Door number 1 was as dark as the rest of the house. It looked like an office, and there was a laptop which I quickly grabbed, as I had to ignore the feeling of being watched. I had done a few jobs like this, but I had never experienced this level of anxiety, not even on my first one. I took the laptop while Sam rustled around and told him what my haul was. He asked if I had found anything else, and I said nothing valuable. But to be honest, I hadn't really looked all that hard. I just wanted to get out of here. I couldn't get that room in the basement out of my head. I asked Sam what he had found, but he was not answering, which both irritated and bothered me. "Sam," I hissed. "Sam!" His voice came out again. "Dude, there's another weird room in here." I cursed under my breath and went in. It was like the one downstairs, but not quite as ritualized. There were a bunch of weird little idols strewn along with candles, and a bookshelf with all sorts of occult type stuff. I had seen enough. Door number 2 was disturbing, but not as bad as the basement. Sam, however, seemed more amused than he ever had been with the first one. This guy is one sick puppy. Alright, go back downstairs and do a quick once-over, and let's get the hell out of here. I was happy to hear that, and didn't need telling twice. Though I was not happy with separating at the time. I went downstairs and looked around with my flashlight, seeing that there was an old heavy TV, the kind that most people had not used in about 20 years. It wasn't worth taking, but I remember thinking it was strange they were still using such primitive stuff. I looked around a bit longer, going through some drawers. There were some things I might have taken for personal use under normal circumstances, but I wanted nothing to do with this place, much less wanting to take a piece of it home with me. I kept checking around, and that's when I saw it. The same statue that had been in the basement. The figure of the 4 intertwined bodies bound into the unspeakable or unknowable act. There was hunger, lust, agony, bliss. I wondered how anyone could make one of these abominations, much less 2. I went to the basement to start bringing some of the stuff out of the house, and I couldn't help but take another look at the weird room. That's when I noticed that the figurine was no longer on the altar. I remember an icy fist grasping my heart, and I turned on my walkie. The static hit me as I went on the channel. We both used walkie-talkies in case we ever got caught. They could not track our conversations or locations via cell phone. "Sam," I hissed. "Sam, did you move that sick-looking figurine upstairs?" There was nothing but static. I continued calling into the walkie-talkie. Just static. I tried once more. "Sam, answer, damn it!" The static turned.
"Sam's with us now,"
a voice whispered. That icy fist on my heart, it clenched harder. "Who is this?" The static returned and I heard what I thought was a short chuckle. A voice came in once more, and was deeper and far harsher, almost guttural. The word inhuman comes to mind. It was different than the last voice.
"Come see."
I cursed hard and felt the overwhelming urge to drop the walkie, to throw it at the wall the same way one might throw a bug that had crawled on their hand. It invoked revulsion. The walkie was a bridge between me and whatever was on the other side of that channel, and more importantly, what was lurking upstairs. I was worried about Sam, very worried. I was scared for myself too, but I was not going to just leave him here. A thought occurred to me that this was a trick, a joke, but this was not the time for games, and even if it was one hell of a feat to pull something off like this. No, it didn't make sense. This was not a joke. I was torn between a sense of urgency in helping my friend, and the dread of staying in this house and going further into it. I stilled myself as best as I could, and decided if I had to do it, I was gonna be fast. And I ran up the stairs like a bat out of hell, into the kitchen and back towards the other narrow set of stairs that led upstairs to the second floor. I could hear banging on the walls, scratches. It was like the entire house was coming to life. I tried to ignore it, but it was damn near impossible, and it was all I could do to not piss myself and take off right then and there. Sam be damned, metaphorically and literally. I made it to the foot of the stairs. The darkness at the top was encroaching further down, invading beyond its borders almost aggressively. The darkness was getting more dense, getting deeper. "Sam!" I called up into the darkness. I could not bring myself to walk up those steps and into the pitch black. I was starting to panic. I saw a shape at the top of the steps. It was a mass, and at first, I could not make it out in the darkness, but as it got closer, it became more clear. The lack of visibility didn't matter, because I was not seeing whatever this was with my eyes. The only way I could describe it was, I was seeing it with my soul. It was the figurine, only life-size now. The 4 writhing bodies bound together, melted as if their skin was made of wax, limbs intertwining. As they flailed and the abomination crawled slowly down the stairs, I could hear my heart beating in my head. The scratching, the knocking. It all stopped as if in reverence for what was now coming down those stairs to meet me. Its footsteps uneven from the extra limbs. The deliberate shuffle began as it navigated its way down the path, coming down to me. Its other limbs stretching out as if embracing me, beckoning me into the hell of its existence. One of the faces turned to look at me, twisted in the rictus of a dozen sensations, lost in equal parts bliss, terror, and torment. It was Sam. I ran. When I did, the noise of the house erupted again, everything banging, and there was a shrieking sound reverberating from the walls that echoed across it, sounding like dozens of separate voices, each one distinct. There was accusation in those shrieks, anger, hunger. The house was pissed, but it was also hungry. The shrieks became guttural like a pack of dogs. Then they yowled like a bunch of cats having sex. I ran for the basement, but the door slammed shut, and I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge an inch. I could hear the uneven sounds of the abomination coming down, step by step. Then I heard a louder crash. It sounded like it had thrown itself down the steps. It wanted me that bad. It was not wasting time like some horror movie monster trying to build suspense. It was not trying to scare me. It was trying to take me. I thought I heard Sam's voice weeping. "It hurts so good. It hurts so damn good, buddy. Come and get some of this." I screamed and pulled with all my might, and the door finally unjammed and I headed down the stairs, tripping halfway down and hitting the ground. I felt pain in my temple and was bleeding, but I didn't care. I was up again in an instant and going out of the cellar door. On my way out, I felt something reach out of the weird room, groping for my neck, clammy and vice-like. It tore my hoodie but slipped as I ran out into the moisture of the night. I didn't care about the goods. I didn't care about anything other than getting as much distance from me in this place as I could. Luckily, TC's piece of shit van didn't need a key and was turned on via screwdriver. I jumped in and fumbled for it, looking frantically in the rearview mirror. The storm was picking up now. I fumbled harder and did the trick. The van sputtered to life and I punched it out of there. I only stopped for gas once and was gripped by paranoia, thinking I saw the abomination in every dark corner. I tried to tell TC what happened, but could not really bring myself to speak of it. He was pissed he didn't make anything out of it either, and told me to lose his number. Accused me and Sam of holding out on him. I never figured out what that house was supposed to be, and I was too afraid to even look it up again to see if it had been sold. I'm thinking of doing it again, but even opening that tiny door terrifies me. The house taught me something profound in the brief time I spent in there. Not knowing was better sometimes. As for Sam, I checked desperately for any news of him being found in that town, but there was nothing. I didn't know his family, nor many of his friends, and no one came to ask me about him. Sam was prone to wander, and this was not the first time he upped and vanished. As far as everyone else was concerned, I knew what happened though. They, or it, had told me. Sam was with them now. He would always be with them.